The nation of Israel had come out of slavery in Egypt. They eventually came to the plains of Moab across the Jordan River from Jericho, and God was blessing them after having had punished them to teach them how to obey him. And the nation of Moab was afraid of them, and God would only bless them because they were his and they were doing what is right. And then God wiped out 25,000 of them. And here's what happened. The king of Moab sent down to them, at Balaam's suggestion, beautiful women to entice the men to take on the values instead of the deity Baal, and they bailed on God. They left him. They went with these women and had sex with them, and which was against what God had said. Leviticus chapters 18 and 20 and various places in the Old Testament set down the basics of here's what's acceptable behavior sexually, and here is what's not acceptable. Basically, it leaves the only acceptable expression: having sex with someone who is your lifetime wife, or women, your lifetime husband. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 6, it reads this way: "But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality, or of any kind of impurity or greed, because these are improper for God's holy people." In our society today, it's easy to think, well, we'll more or less follow, we'll do kind of, sort of, but we need, if we're going to follow Jesus, if we're going to follow God, we need to follow 100% and follow him wholeheartedly and completely. We understand from John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, and verses 14 and 15, that Jesus is the creator. Jesus has been with God from the very beginning. Jesus is God. He and the Father are one. We understand from Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, that the physical Jesus, he is the exact representation of God in his character and in what he does. He is our creator. Jesus tells us how to behave, and we need to listen to what he says. In Ephesians 5:6, where it says not even a hint of immorality, that's one of the men who was trained by Jesus through visions and dreams, actually, Paul, who wrote that. He says there shouldn't be any hint of. How are you living? Are you living with no hint of what God would call sexual immorality, when God says the proper expression is a lifetime commitment in marriage? The rest of that passage says, nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving, and gives more. You can read it in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 6 and following. In Mark chapter 7, Jesus said, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of the person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these come from inside and defile a person. They make us dirty. They make us not worthy of being before God. They make us sinful before God. So adultery and sexual immorality, both the kind of adultery that is against your spouse, or sexual immorality in general, which the word for that in Greek is porne, from which we get pornography, those are wrong. John chapter 8, the teachers of the law brought a woman who was caught in the act of sexual sin to Jesus to say, the law that Moses gave us said she should be stoned. What do you say we should do? And Jesus ended up saying to the woman, when everybody else had left and had said, I'm not sinless, I'm not throwing the first stone because of what Jesus set up, Jesus said, go and don't sin anymore. Stop your life of sin. That kind of behavior, Jesus clearly said there, is sinful. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus said, you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery, don't commit sexual sin. But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. Think about this. Think about how we get trained as we grow up and in adolescence. Jesus said, looking at someone lustfully is the same as committing the sin If you look at someone with sexual thoughts, or you want to take the clothes off, you want to whatever, Jesus says that is just as bad. Do not do that, in other words. He told the woman who was caught in the very act of it, don't do what you do anymore. And then Jesus had said also to think about it, to have it in your heart when you look at someone. You can look at someone just over on the internet, not see them live. You can look at photos of people. Do not do those things if we're going to follow Jesus Christ 100% with not even a hint of sexual immorality. Then we need to hear what Jesus actually says how to live. We need to discipline ourselves instead of what society says. I'm not going to think about that unless that is someone I have married for life. And so Jesus goes on and says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. And he goes, take whatever you need to do to get something out of your life. And I don't know if any of his disciples that actually gouged out an eye. I think he's showing us how serious that is. And saying if there's something in your life, even if it feels like it's an integral part of you, and this is how I am, get it out of your life. In the Greco-Roman world, sexual immorality was prevalent. In the life of following Jesus, it is not to be, there's not even to be a hint of it. In Matthew 18, 6 through 8, Jesus talks about anything that trips up our faith, that entices us to sin, things that we shouldn't do those things. He says, if anyone causes a little person, whether it's young in the faith or young chronologically, if anyone causes a little one to sin, to stumble, it would be better to have a huge millstone tied around their neck, actually with a rope, and then thrown into the deepest part of the sea than to cause somebody else to sin. So not only should you not do things, but do not dress in a way, do not act in a way that cause somebody else to think about doing sexual things with you. Because he said it's better, and again we're in Matthew 18, 6 through 8, better than to have something cut out of your life than to be supposedly whole, physically, whatever. Then it's better to enter life maimed than to have 2 hands, 2 feet, and be thrown into eternal fire. The consequences of sexual immorality are clear. Not even a hint, no pornography, no looking at somebody lustfully, not dressing or acting in a way to make someone think about having sex with you.